Hello and welcome back to the podcast. This episode we're joined by Mr. Polzin, board member of Chord Energy, founder and executive chairman of Camino Natural Resources, and venture partner of M.B.A. Energy, a private equity investment firm based in Dallas, Texas. Previously, Mr. Polzin served as CEO of Centennial Resource Development from 2013 until 2016. Prior to forming Camino and Centennial, Mr. Polzin served as a managing director and founding partner in investment banking at Tudor, Pickering, Holt, where he led the firm's E&P asset acquisition and divestiture practice. Mr. Polzin earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Petroleum Engineering from the Colorado School of Mines, an M.B.A. from Rice University, and is also a CFA charter holder. Among other things, we discussed 40 years of American energy, a few lessons from E&P and banking. This podcast episode is powered by ATB Capital Markets. ATB Capital Markets provides financial solutions and strategic advisory services to help businesses thrive. With a track record of successful deal execution, ATB is a full-service investment dealer with a deep understanding and commitment to the industries it serves. Visit atbcapitalmarkets.com for more information. This episode is brought to you by Upgrade Labs. Upgrade Labs offers a comprehensive range of cutting-edge performance and recovery services that have been proven to optimize your health in minutes, not hours. Whether it's accelerating muscle mass and bone density or addressing injury and inflammation, start your experience by booking a free cell health analysis at upgradelabs.com/Calgary. This podcast is brought to you by Energy United. Energy United is an organization with a mission to promote practical energy policy across Canada. Energy United is building a community of Canadians that are passionate about Canada's natural gas and oil industry and are willing to take action. Energy United is driving change on issues that matter, all the way from the carbon tax to the emissions cap. Join Energy United to make a difference at energyunited.ca. Okay, well, if you're ready, we can begin.
Sounds great.
Good morning, Mr. Polzin. Thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you very much. I enjoy it.
For the listener, among other things, you are founder and executive chairman of Camino Resources. You're a board member of Chord. You're a venture partner at NGP. But how would you describe your day job?
That's a tough question, actually. And no, I would describe my day job as all energy all the time, but in a different, more advisory role now. And it's certainly not day to day running a company anymore, but I'm thrilled to be able to kind of influence some things and just be a part of some really growing, fun companies. So it's a little bit of everything. I spend a lot of time reading on the macro and the micro of our industry to stay up to speed. So it's still energy, still all the time, but it's a little less hectic than it used to be.
As we discussed, you've had a very interesting career. So I thought we could structure the conversation chronologically, more or less. Along the way, you've been an engineer, a banker, an entrepreneur, board member, and you're also big into the outdoors. Snowboarder, if I'm correct.
Correct. Yeah.
Have you been outboarding yet this year?
I have not. We've just got our first snow really and I'm based in Denver and we've just got our first snow and it's time. Give me another week and I'll be able to say yes.
Well, it's snowing in Calgary today. So maybe next time you can bring your equipment and get out to the Lake Louise or something.
That would be a lot of fun.
To go back to the beginning, maybe, how did you get into energy and why?
Great. No, I really feel like I've been energy my entire life. I grew up in the oil field. My father was blue collar, worked out on pipelines. And so I kind of grew up in very small oil field towns in Kansas and Oklahoma and ultimately Colorado. So I've really been thrilled to have lived it. And I think now I know we're in Canada, so I've used some American, euphemisms, but, I'm lucky to live the American dream where I came from a blue collar family but I was able to go to college and I loved the industry. So the obvious step was for me to become a petroleum engineer, knowing what I liked as a kid. So it started that way. Along the way, I also got an M.B.A. and a CFA because I've also really enjoyed the financial side of our industry. But my first job out of college was with BP in Alaska. Loving the outdoors, I was saying, I want to go to Alaska. That's my first choice. So I actually spent 8-9 years in Anchorage, but working on the North Slope, and it allowed me to see phenomenal oil and gas facilities. But at the same time, I got to be outdoors and skiing, and that's when I became a snowboarder instead of being a skier as I grew up. So loved boarding in Alaska, and just loved the vibrancy of the industry. The late 80s, early 90s were tough times in the industry. Prices were low. Really, there were layoffs. The first 5 years of my career, there was a layoff every year, but you just survived that, quite frankly, and went from there. So it was a great place to be.
I can't remember where you did your engineering degree originally.
Sure. Yeah. Being from Colorado, I went to the Colorado School of Mines, great engineering school, and I still am involved there a lot on a couple of boards, and really want to give back to the school that did so much for me. And then went to Houston for my M.B.A. at Rice University, and then to Alaska.
So you did your M.B.A. right out of school? Or?
I did, which I don't recommend. And back in those days, in the 80s, you could kind of do that. They discourage that more now. And I get why. Having more industry experience before you do that is the right answer. In 1984, when I got out with the Petroleum Engineering degree, was a terrible time in the business, and there were very few jobs. And I just love learning. And I also I knew early on that even though I was going to be an engineer, I really liked the finance as well. So I figured I'm a poor student. 2 more years being a poor student is really easy. And then 2 years later, it'll be better. And it wasn't, but I still did I still got a great engineering job with BP. So, and now I had the finance background too.
So what'd you do after BP?
Yeah, I think things were great at a big company for me. And it was kind of, again, yes, great, solid job. You're paid well. And if you do well, which I was, you'll have a career for life. And many of my friends continued to do that. But I could tell about when I hit age 30 that for me, that was when the light bulb came on. It's like, I want to be just a little more entrepreneurial. And so I ended up leaving BP, and I'll skip a few steps along the way. But a few years after that, I was able to join a startup in Denver that was a little 10-person oil and gas company in the old days of coal bed methane, which dates me, but of the Powder River Basin back then. And so I really that was my beginning training wheels of entrepreneurship. And I didn't own the company at all, had a great person who did, but it really gave me the ability to do a broad set of skills, which is what interests me. For instance, I was both our reservoir engineer and our CFO, which is a unique situation and can only happen in a very small company. So that was perfect for me. And so, but at that point, I'm kind of transitioning out of kind of direct engineering every day. And we went to sell the company. This is in the early 2000s. And we hired Watrous here from Calgary to sell us. And that turned out being very successful. But as I kind of joke, the person who started the company is a great guy and a mentor, and he did really well. And I was kind of a small peon, so I needed to find a new job. And luckily Watrous said, hey, why don't you join us and kind of learn this A&D and buying and selling business. So that was my first stop. Is now I'm kind of more of a banker, but a technical banker, so to speak. And that's where I got to really start coming to Calgary a lot and working for Adam Watrous and Chris Lubicki, and Hillary Folks was there, working with them. So I started to create some great friendships and connections in Calgary.
Shout out to Chris, big supporter of the podcast. So connection common. The company when you started, what was the name of that company when you were around 30? The first entrepreneurial?
Well, that was called Independent Production Company, but I didn't start that. I really just joined something that was already kind of up and running for that. But then we fast forward a few years, enjoying my time at Watrous, but also having a niche to still kind of start an oil company someday. And then right about that time, this is around 2005, and I'm coming to Calgary a little bit, Enerplus makes their first acquisition in the United States in the early days of the Bakken in 2005. And I got to know them as a banker, Ian Dundas, who was there, Gord Kerr at the time, CEO. And they had just made this acquisition in the U.S. and they needed someone to build their U.S. division. And they hired me in Denver to start up the U.S. practice, so to speak, for Enerplus. So that for me was another set of training wheels. I think my entrepreneurial direction wasn't like I was at age 25. I want to build a business. No, for me, it was kind of training steps. And that one was great because we were able to build, a 60-person team to run the U.S., but I had the help and great leadership of the mothership, here in Calgary. So I wasn't doing it on my own, which was perfect, and so that kind of started that venture. And then again, more just stepping along the way. Times were great there and really enjoyed it and still have great friendships from that today. But continued that evolution of the desire to start something. So I really, about that time, I'm now reaching approximately 40 and thinking about starting an oil company, but doing fine and enjoying Interplus. But a great friend of mine, who I'd met, at Goldman Sachs, Maynard Holt, and we had talked many times about maybe starting up a new investment bank. And for a couple of years, and him bringing what a Goldman brings and me bringing what I learned at Watrous, both great situations, just a little different. So lo and behold, I get a phone call one day from him. It's like, hey, Bobby Tudor and myself, Maynard, are leaving Goldman. We're going to start a new investment bank. Would you like to start with us? And kind of bring that, be the technical partner who comes from industry. We got all these banking partners. We need somebody who's lived the industry. So at that point, I thought, well, okay, I'm not going to start an oil company. I'll do this. And you got 10 senior people all putting it on their careers on the line and starting from scratch. And that would be great. You can contribute to that. If you're not great, you've got other 9 people that you hope are, right? So it wasn't the success of the business wasn't on one person. It was on all of us doing our niche and putting it together. So did that and joined Tudor, Pickering, Holt, and that's turned out great. And it's fun for me to see, like, both Interplus grew dramatically more than when I was there. TPH has grown dramatically more since I've left there too. So I'm thrilled to have been on the early days of those, but to see it be even far bigger and far better than it was when I was there, right? Things get better over time. And so then fast forward 7 or 8 years after being at TPH, again, really enjoying it. Nothing negative at all. But what it really allowed me to do, this is by luck, starting there, we started that firm in about 2007. And they had a sales and trading by Dan Pickering and research that was great kind of on its own prior to that. And that was really critical to creating TPH, was having that backbone. But the investment banking really started in about 2007. Well, coincidentally, that's when shale is taking off in the United States and up here as well. So we were lucky to have been starting a firm that we could focus on shale really from day one. So that allowed me on a personal level to work every basin, still as a technical banker, but you're working the Permian, you're working the Bakken, you're kind of all over the United States. So you're just getting a great feel for every basin and which one's going well, which one's not. And then at the same time, you're getting hired to sell companies from many different private equity backed firms like the Quantums and, InCap, NGP. So, you made great relationships with those types of companies, effectively the money supporting the industry. Mm-hmm. Fast forward those 7 or 8 years. Now I'm pushing 50 and, I still want to start an oil company. And what I had learned through all that process was you're probably not going to get the money to start an oil company if you're 60. That's just reality. Your first one. I figured if I'm going to ever do it and kind of get the capital behind me, I better do it now. So that was my motivation, is to win. But so I really didn't start, that until, later in my career. And I think what I would just add for folks who are entrepreneurs, some people want to do that at age 25. For me, I did want to do it earlier than age 50, but for me, it was incremental steps. And maybe it's my DNA of being an engineer that it's kind of like I wanted to build and get more confidence. And now I know accounting, and now I know all land. I know all these things that I didn't know when I was 30. And now I put it together and I have the confidence that I can go do that. So, backed by NGP, we started a company called Centennial. And this was in 2013 in early days of Permian shale. And we started in the Delaware Basin as opposed to the Midland Basin. We looked a lot in the Midland Basin, but it was hotter and more expensive, and I just didn't want to pay the price. At that point in time, the Delaware side of the Permian was earlier stage. So less known, more risk, but cheaper. So we went all in on the Delaware. And, knock on wood, that turned out to be a great call. 3 or 4 years later, in 2016, we were getting ready to go public with Centennial and had our S1. Everything was done and ready to go about 2 weeks from our road show. And we luckily got the offer we couldn't refuse. And we kind of got de-SPAC'd. If people remember some of the SPACs, this one actually worked. Mark Papa of EOG fame was working for Riverstone, looking for a company to buy, to take public. And I'm proud that someone of his caliber, quite frankly, wanted to buy our company. So It did go public. It just went public without me. And some of us spun out and created another company. Some of us stayed and were able to have great careers at the public Centennial. And then we spun out another private equity company back. So it was a great opportunity for everybody to either stay public or not and have options.
And that takes us more or less to today. We'll get
almost.
I have so many questions.
Yeah. No, sorry. So those of us who spun out of Centennial and decided, hey, let's just do it again, meaning a private company as opposed to public. And we created now the company that we have is called Camino, still Denver based, but now focused in Oklahoma in the scoop and merge plays there, as well as Wyoming and the Powder River Basin. So we've been doing that for 6 or 7 years, and now we're up to about 60,000 BOE a day net, so pretty good size. And it's just interesting to see how times have changed. And the euphoria of 2016, 2017, the market wanted inventory, not necessarily production. So we were taking Centennial public at 10,000 BOE a day. That's it. And, I know that happens in Canada, but that doesn't happen in the United States. And we sell it for almost $2 billion. Today we have a private company that's got 60,000 BOE a day, or 6 times bigger, and there would be no contemplating of going public because the market's just changed so dramatically. Neither good nor bad. It's just back then you were valued on inventory and wanted growth, and production wasn't important. Today it's just the opposite. You're getting valued on production. So we have a team of 90 to 100 people running 4 rigs in Oklahoma and 1 in Wyoming. So quite busy. And I've stepped away from day to day, and Seth Yurdy is our CEO and an awesome guy and 20 years younger than me. And it's time for the next generation to kick some butt, and they're doing a great job.
Do you remember your first day at Tudor, Pickering, and Holt? And did you think to yourself, this is a good collection of people? This feels good?
That's a great question. And yes, I kind of do remember my first day. And I remember in a couple of, it feels really good, first of all positive. And it didn't fit the stereotypes of an investment bank. I didn't grow up as a, 20-something or 30-something in an investment bank. You hear some horror stories.
Sharks.
And yeah, exactly. And that was not the culture at TPH. And that was my bet that it would not be. And that was a good bet because Maynard and Bobby created a culture that was all for one and one for all. I mean, it sounds trite, but it was absolutely true. And I saw that from day one. So that was the positive. And I wouldn't say the negative, but the motivation on day one is, oh, we have zero revenue, right? We're starting from nothing. So if we don't hustle and really get out and beat the pavement and show potential clients that we know what we're talking about and provide some good advice, this is going to fall apart. Then that's great motivation because and there's nobody else to blame but yourself if that doesn't work. So that was great. But that was also a day one kick in the butt that you've got to get out and work hard.
Mr. Maynard Holt has been a big supporter of the podcast, and actually Dan Pickering did the podcast too, so it's a small world.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
Was it a big risk for you to start TPH, and was it a big investment, time and capital-wise?
Yeah, not necessarily capital, and we learned that, and I think one of the great things that I kind of learned through all this time of what it takes to start something is you've got to have capital, right? And Bobby and Maynard and Dan had done really well, quite frankly, and they could put up the capital for us to start the business. And there's not a lot of people who can do that, and then they could. So I saw that it was something very unique. We had a great and still do a version of it, but Petrie Parkman in the United States was another really good investment bank that was kind of niche to the industry where they combined technical and financial, and they started about 20 years prior. So they really opened that door of creating that type of entity. A new one had not been created in 20 years. So I saw that, so that there was an opening to kind of create another, and there was space for another one, right? And that became TPH. So strategically, I think it was a great call for them.
Did you realize there was space in the banking sector at the time, or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because I think it seems obvious now, and it's going to date me with my gray hair, but around the year 2000, and TPH kind of really kicks off, as I mentioned, 2007, but you had Watrous up here, who is very technical in the United States as a bank. And then they get bought by Scotia. So they're combining that technical with Scotia's bigger bank capabilities, which is great. That happened in the United States. The equivalent of Scotia would have been Randall and Dewey, which was also very technical. And then Jeffries buys Randall and Dewey, kind of the same way Scotia buys Watrous, to combine technical and financial together. And really, I give credit to those four companies that they changed the way we do energy banking. And it's because now it doesn't matter here in town, if you're at Peters or TPH or Scotia, that there's a group of technical people at that bank. And that's just what happens. Well, that was not the case 20 to 25 years ago. And so luckily I was on the kind of beginning wave of that. And now you think, why would you do it any other way? Well, we did it a different way. But now it works perfect because I think obviously I'm biased being a technical person by original training, but our industry is so technical that you just need to have those skills, and you have to have great financial skills too. So how do you blend those two together? And that's just been lucky for me. I love both sides of that business, and I've been able to kind of jump back and forth between roles that are more technical. And then I'm like, okay, I'm losing my financial skills. Maybe I need to move to a little more financial and back and forth. And now at an age and experience that I kind of get to do all of it at the same time. But earlier in your career, you're kind of one or the other. But over time, able to blend those together.
And coincidentally, maybe not so coincidentally, shale revolution took off at the same time TPH was getting going.
Yeah.
At what point did you realize this was going really well as a result of that?
It took I would say it probably took 2 or 3 years. It wasn't day one, but you could see it coming because luckily kind of coming from Enerplus, which was for me was Bakken. I really had nothing to do with the Canadian operations. I was Bakken US. Bakken was the first oil basin play in the United States, shale wise. And so I had a running head start. But then so the Bakken a lot of deals start getting done, and we were early part of that, and that paid the bills, quite frankly, for those first few years. And then you started to see the DJ in Colorado, and then you started to see the Permian clearly eclipse all of the above because of the scale and the size. But so you just had to be flexible to kind of forecast a little bit of which basin's going to be hot and growing and which ones are not, and kind of put yourself in front of that train, and kind of hopefully get run over by that train in a good way.
The critique of the shale revolution was that although it was good for society, production, and the growth of the sector, sometimes there wasn't enough profits to go around. How did you think about that when you were navigating that time?
And that is a very fair and accurate criticism back of that era of shale, no question. And you really didn't think about it too much at that era, to be very honest, because both the public markets were wanting that production, but really sticks, that they were wanting future inventory. And so as a private, you were just basically providing the market what they wanted. And if you could do that, you can do well. So we didn't have the introspection as an industry that we probably should have. We have that introspection now loud and clear, and we've flipped over, right? It needs to be less growth and more profitability. Back then, though, the positive of that era was you just didn't know. I mean, which basin was really going to work. So hence you were trying lots of basins and basins now that we're not in, and because they didn't work. Right. But you've got to try those to figure that out. So I'm not going to be overly critical of that time, but certainly we needed to evolve, and we have. So I'm glad we have.
It's easy to look back. Hindsight's 2020.
Yeah.
Do you remember anyone who did really well? Does anyone stick out from that shale time? The companies that were successful?
Oh, absolutely. There's a ton of them, right? And it kind of depends on the scale. Like when I think of big companies, especially for the U.S., the assumption, which is true, is that really shale was unlocked by the independents. It wasn't unlocked by the BPs and the Shells and the Exxons. Early on, now they've done a phenomenal job of that, the big companies. But back then, so you take like an EOG, someone like that in those early days, which was a big company, but not major size company. They did phenomenal. If I had to pick a name off the top of my head that really led that, Concho out of the Delaware and Midland would be there as well, right? So mid-size independents at the time, they're not mid-size anymore. And Concho's part of Conoco, but they've grown deservedly, and a little bit after that, like Diamondback has just been spectacular. That's on the public side. On the private side, every single basin has success stories, and some folks love it to stay private and have noticed, they're happy to sell to the big guy and do it again, right? So there's been a ton of success.
And then, so when you were about 50, you started your own E&P company?
Yeah, that would have been starting Centennial.
So how much risk did that involve?
A lot, to be honest. And I want to say, I wouldn't call it my own. You don't start anything without a lot of people and a lot of help, right? So you've got to have the capital. So that was the partnering with NGP. They've been a great partner, and now, been around them for 15 years and still help them in the kind of gray-haired advisory role. And then it's people, right? And I think that's one of the things that highly motivated me to do that, to kind of jump off from TPH and start a company, was a few things. But one is just, quite frankly, creating jobs for people. And I felt, kind of growing up in the blue collar world I did, you got an appreciation for every other Friday when the paycheck came in. That was important. And quite frankly, and having benefits and having, for us, a 401k and it's like, if I can do that, it feels like I'm kind of giving back to what was given to me as a child and in my family. So I really wanted to build, I wanted to build jobs, to be very blunt, and kind of, it doesn't have to be thousands. It don't have to be Bill Gates, but I want to do my own support, to that. And it was also, by that time, it was, I guess influence might be the right word, or meaning, I wanted to make the strategic decisions of what basin, how fast, how slow, what are we going to focus on? And you do that collectively, obviously, with the senior management team, but to be responsible for that, because all of those companies, when you have success, and luckily we've had that, it's the team's success. There's no question, because you need great land, you need great operations, and every role is super important. Doesn't matter from what the title is. If one thing is not working, then the whole thing is going to fall apart. So that was the fun part, is building a culture that respects that and makes that happen. But the flip side too is, if I always feel too, if the company fails, or so to speak, we can define what that might mean, but it's your fault. It's the CEO's fault. I really believe that. So the success is the team's success, but the failure is not, because it's your responsibility to make sure the company is performing well. And if it's not, you need to look at yourself and do something different, right? So that's how I felt. And at that point, I was ready. It's like, I want to try this. Yep.
To create a symmetry of risk with your employees and shareholders, did you feel it was important to put your own money in to the venture?
Oh, big time. And you're required to as well. So that's not an option. You're going to do that. And you should, because you need to pucker up and be a little scared that there's a lot riding on this for yourself personally and everybody else as well, right? Oh yeah, you've got to, and private equity is going to require you to do that, as they well should. Yeah.
But it turned out well, and eventually sold. Do you remember the day you sold?
Oh yeah. No, and I was happy as can be. And you need to celebrate your successes, and everybody was happy, meaning all of our employees, because it was a perfect outcome at Centennial, because if you wanted to stay, you could stay and be a part of that. And if you wanted to leave, you now had a bankroll that allowed you to take some risks that you might not have been able to do before. So I was super excited, because one thing that's motivated me is, when you're creating a private company like that, you kind of get to decide how the ownership in the company is spread out, right? And how the incentives are spread. And we tried to go really wide, and every employee had equity in the company that was given to them. They didn't have to put up money to get it. So, everybody wins. And I kind of remember, we were 60 employees or something like that, but 15, 20 people were paying off mortgages, buying a new house, fully funding their child's college education, those things that, again, I don't want to, the American dream type of stuff, but Canadian dream as well, right? So you were able, that's what I was proud of, that there were many, many families that were able to step up a significant level in their financial future, which was awesome. So super happy.
What'd you do that night? Did you... Nice dinner out?
I don't even think my wife and I went out to dinner. It was just more of opened up a bottle of wine for sure. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But my wife grew up like I did in a blue collar home, and pretty humble about that. It's like, we're just going to smile and be happy.
So around that time, you didn't have to work anymore, but maybe that occurred earlier. What has motivated you since then or around that time? What do you find gets you out of the bed in the morning?
Yeah, that's changes over time. Back then, yeah, why did we start Camino? Lucky enough, we didn't kind of have to do that, but I still wanted to continue. It's like, okay, now with that track record, you're able to raise money, and not everybody can. And so it's felt, let's raise this and do it again, in the sense of we can build a new and broader team, some of the same people, but it just, let's keep those jobs rolling, quite frankly. And for me, it would also became, so now that's 7 years ago ish. And fast forward to today, we have a great team there. And as I was getting older, and it's like, man, that there's just other people who are going to do a great job, and I don't need to be doing that day to day. Right. So, and they're better at it than me. Seth, as I mentioned before, is just phenomenal, as a CEO and a technical and commercial, and our CFO, Riley Hegarty, and many others. I could keep going on and on. So it's great to help or to provide an opportunity for that next generation to step up. And I shouldn't say help, it's provide the opportunity. So that motivated me to say, okay, we can put this team together. And if we're here a while longer, as we have been, then I can step away and they can run the ship and do it better than I. So that was my motivation then. My motivation today is playing more of these board roles, and I fully admit that means I don't have to be up at 7:30 every day at the office, and that's kind of nice. And I can do, I can do that, but not every day. And I don't get the phone call on the weekend when something's going wrong, and that's okay. I used to be that person, and now I'm happy not being that person. And it's just an evolution of your career. And if you're lucky, like I've been, to kind of make that decision on your own, it's great. So pinch myself every day that I've been able to evolve my career to what makes me happy at that point in life.
Maybe a different kind of work. For instance, you're up here in Calgary on a snowy November day doing podcasts like this. So you're still working. Different.
Exactly. Still working, just more flexibility around it. Yeah, absolutely. And I love to work, and I love our industry. So I spend a lot of time still, reading and paying attention, and it gives you more time for philanthropy as well. So involved with a few things like that. Education is important to me and my wife, and whether it's grade school to college. So we focus our efforts around that, and those less fortunate, and trying to get everybody that opportunity.
This podcast episode is sponsored by Conate Water Solutions. Do you need cost-effective water sourcing options to supply your next drilling or completions program? Conate Water Solutions is a specialized hydrogeology company focused on water well drilling, testing, and water management services in Western Canada and Texas. Contact info@conatewater.com or check out conatewater.com for more details. This podcast is brought to you by Rare Oilfield Services. Rare is a locally owned company that specializes in redeployment of surplus oil and gas production equipment through buying, selling, and refurbishing. Rare has a large shop that can restore anything including separators, tanks, line heaters, knockouts, and treaters. Whether it's reconditioned, new, or used equipment that you're in the market for, contact rareoil.com for more information. Through your experience in E&P and banking and basically every side of the business, one thing I've wondered is, from a strategy point of view, have you found there to be value in trying to predict prices through the years? Some people like to analyze storage reports and charts, and most forecasts are wrong ultimately. So something I've been thinking about. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think you are. You're always forecasting prices in your head, or, it doesn't necessarily mean you're acting upon that perceive or what your forecast is. And I say that in a few ways. One, it's like, okay, if oil versus gas, if you believe oil is going to be higher and gas is going to be lower, then maybe I should be investing more in oil deals than gas deals, right? So that's more qualitative than quantitative, but you set the direction of the company based upon a little bit on where you think prices are headed. You also, when more quantitatively, you're hedging a lot of production, both gas and oil. So now you like to be systematic in hedging. Most people do. There's lots of varying opinions on hedging, but I think the consensus would be, if you're big enough big enough to hedge, you're probably going to do a bit of it programmatic. you're going to be adding hedges all the time, maybe not a lot, whether prices are up or down, because whatever you forecast, you're going to be wrong. I've been wrong before and I've been right before, but you're going to be wrong. And sometimes if I think oil prices are lower today than they will be a year from now, I still might do my programmatic hedge, but I will do less of it. And then when I think prices are a little higher than they're going to be, then I might do a little bit more, right? So you're moving around the edges, I think, all the time. So yeah, like it or not, you're making a bet on pricing and you need to have an opinion.
How much effort do you put into that? Or is it more just directionally accurate rather than precisely wrong?
Yeah, exactly. No, I like I'll steal your words right there. It's directionally, in my opinion. I mean, if you're a day-to-day trader, or, the CFO putting all this together, the hedging, they're going to be a little more precise, right? But I think at the kind of C-suite and directional level, it's more directional.
What do you pay attention to when you're looking at the energy sector in general? Are there certain data sources that are higher signal than others? Maybe certain storage reports or drilling rig reports? What do you pay attention to?
All the above. And yeah, so definitely storage. So I'm reading in, the IEA for international, which is a little different these days, but more advocacy than they are data. I think the US is EIA. It's always hard to get the acronym exactly right, but is much more data. And they gave out great data. So from the US for oil and gas production and where it's coming from. So storage, those kind of things. So I think that's more factual. So the EIA out of the United States is still very valuable. But that's more at a macro level, right? It's big. Where's the country headed? The forecasts that come out of, OPEC and other kind of international type of organizations are also useful. And then you're trying to also figure out, supply, demand, how's the price of oil is at some point going to be correlated to just GDP and growth of the world, right? On a financial basis. If the world's not growing, then oil demand's not going to be growing and vice versa. So I also am looking at, manufacturing stats and things like that, just more at the macro level. Longer term, is demand going up or going down, trying to be predictive and look ahead, not just at storage, because storage is great, but it's kind of real time. Okay, what's going to influence a year from now, in my opinion, is more about financial health of the economies.
There's also a lot of people in the energy markets with commentary. Is there anyone that you listen to more than the rest? Maybe Arjun Murti or someone like that, or Maynard Holt?
Right. Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's a good one. I really, I like what they do at Veriton and seeing that. Some of the morning notes from different banks are very helpful. There's quite a few of those. But you also have to take them all with a grain of salt. We all have our own biases, and me included. And like I say, you're as long as I'm right more than 50% of the time, I'm going to be happy because I know I'm going to be wrong. So, I'm more of a synthesizer of lots of things as opposed to just one.
Do you want to do U.S. energy policy? Is that all right? Or
sure. Sure.
On that one. Things are changing in the States. I think you probably know him. Mr. Chris Wright now is the new energy secretary. So,
right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a great move, quite frankly, and great to, Chris is in Denver and lots of us in Denver know Chris, on a friendship level, and you couldn't get a better person as a human being. And then you combine that with his intelligence. And I think people kind of, if you're looking from the outside, he didn't even really start in the oil and gas industry. He started going to MIT and was focused on nuclear. And we think maybe people in the U.S. kind of think that, the Department of Energy really impacts oil and gas. It actually doesn't. The main thing that impacts oil and gas in the United States from the government is the Department of the Interior, which is now the new nomination for that is the governor of North Dakota. So you have someone who's super intelligent on oil and gas. Secretary of Energy kind of handles everything, nuclear, wind, solar, the big picture. And Chris is uniquely qualified to do that. So I'm very optimistic between both of those appointments. And then what's also unique, they're creating this kind of energy not new department, but council, basically a new energy council that's bringing those two plus other departments together to talk about bigger picture. There really is no energy policy in the United States, and probably not Canada either, really. So this appears to be the first time in a long time that they might create a more coordinated effort. And I'm not just talking oil and gas. I'm talking everything, wind, solar, all the above.
So why is this good? Why is this a good shift?
That part's a good shift because we need a coordinated effort. And I'm in all of the above, that we need wind, we need solar, we need more energy. And we can't be knocking down oil and gas when there is just no way wind and solar will ever replace that. It's just laws of physics. It's not going to happen. So, but it needs to be coordinated. We need more of everything. And that coordination really, and it doesn't matter if it's been a Democratic or Republican president, that it's never happened. So this just seems to be a little bit more focused on that this time around. So maybe it will be what we need.
For a bunch of years, it's been a battle for traditional energy. Through 2020, the headwinds seemed to be really strong, but then the tide seems to have kind of shifted. Do you remember when the PDF called Bettering Human Lives appeared, and when that sort of started to change? And you were aware of it the whole time, but when do you think that started to kind of resonate more again?
Oh, I think that's real time. I don't think that started resonating until in the last 12 months, 18 months, meaning it's not very long. I mean, it resonates for those of us who are living it every day, to your point, but getting that broader, that story is really just now happening, which is great. And I think it's because our industry is being a little more focused in how we're describing that. I mean, we need affordable, reliable, secure, right? And as opposed to making it super complicated, right? We're making it, why do we provide energy? What does it do for humans? And is it safe? Is it reliable? And I think by bringing the message down to that type, it resonates with everybody, regardless of your background or political persuasion. We all need that. So I hope we can continue that focused kind of description.
From a U.S. perspective, drill baby drill, good or bad? Or not going to happen?
Well, not going to happen. And by defining that meaning, are we going to increase drilling significantly under a Trump administration? No. These personal opinions, obviously. No. Because what is limiting kind of more growth today is profitability. The market is telling the public companies loud and clear, we don't need growth, we need profitability. And as we talked about earlier, shale 10 years ago was about growth and not profitability. And now it's about profitability, as it should be, right? So, I think over time, with a little easier permitting and things like that, yes, rig counts are going to grow, slowly over time, but it's going to take years, and demand has to be there first, right? We don't need new supply if we don't have the demand. And most people today would probably forecast that oil prices are going to kind of stay where they're at for the next couple of years, just due to the economy worldwide. How's China doing growth wise? That's been the biggest, user of new energy. How will India step into that role? And those are slow. They're not going to happen overnight. So demand right now, we've got extra production capacity around the world in terms of oil. So until we work that off, so to speak, that will drive near term meaning the next couple of years of development more than, I think, policy. Long-term policies going to be very important. But I would argue drill baby drill. I don't like the term, because I think to people who are not in the industry, they treat that as a cavalier. Oh, they're going to, these cowboys are going to go out and do bad things, or, and that's just not true. So I personally don't like that, and we're not going to see an immediate increase in activity, in my opinion.
The incentives aren't there. It's not in the company's interests maybe to go crazy.
Exactly. No, I love your term. The incentive is not there. Yeah. The incentives now are more the market, and, meaning the financial markets, and what do your shareholders want? And your shareholders are not asking for that.
Yeah. LNG, it's been pretty good in the States as it is. Do you think LNG will continue to grow or will it grow faster?
I think it'll continue to grow. I don't think it'll necessarily grow faster because we've already got quite a few new terminals that are in the pipeline, so to speak, that set up growth for the next couple of years, and they take so long, to build and permit one, as it should. They're big entities. So, but I think, with some changes there with the FERC, it will kind of stack up for, hey, we've already got the next 5 years kind of figured out. That's in the development pipeline. Years 6 through 10 now can start being planned upon, right? So yes, I do think it will grow. The world needs it. And really, there's only 3 major countries, us and Qatar and Australia, that do more of the export of LNG, right? Many countries produce natural gas, but to truly export it around the world, there's not a lot of places that have the scale, and we're the biggest. So,
from an American perspective, why has the States been so much better at LNG development in Canada?
You got to get it to a coast, and you've got to go over mountains to go west, and to go east. You don't, but it's a long way, right? That's just uneconomic, probably, right? So it's part of it's geography. It makes a big part of that. We've got a Gulf Coast that's relatively easy to terrain wise to get there. So it's physically more difficult for Canada to do it.
On a lighter note, maybe as we get towards the end, favorite time of your career so far? Is there a time that sticks out, even maybe right now, that you're enjoyed?
I don't know that I have a favorite. I love my life, that's for sure. So I'm happy now, and I was happy 20 years ago as well. And I think I felt that probably where I've been happy, it has been when you're building something, and whether that was at Interplus early days, TPH, Camino, Centennial, it's maybe think of an analogy is I've enjoyed kind of working in a situation where you're kind of taking the company from 0 to 60 miles an hour, and then it needs to go to 90, and there's somebody else that's better at taking it from 60 to 90, and there's somebody else that's better at keeping it at 90, right? So I've been happy and most kind of motivated going from 0 to 60.
Best deal you've seen yet? Is there one that sticks out?
I don't really think I have one. I think there's so many good ones out there. And I know that sounds trite to say, but every day there's something surprises you or it doesn't surprise you, but there's a new deal every other week, it seems like. And I think the dominance of the Permian has been interesting over the last 5-6 years, and growth in production, growth in deals, really kind of growth of everything. So I think those Permian deals that have been done, whether it's big companies like Diamondback just buying Endeavor on a big scale, or some of the kind of couple of $1 billion deals that come out of private equity, they all have their niche and they're all successful. But I think it's the consolidation of all that is what I find intriguing.
Best well you've ever seen drilled?
Actually, that's some recent bias on that one. We've just drilled one in the Powder River Basin that's produced over 600,000 barrels of oil in 12 months, and literally one of the best wells in the United States, but no one's paying attention because it's not in the Permian. So the point of that can be that it can come, that type of success can come from a lot of places. And so that's
600,000 barrels in 12 months.
In 12 months, yeah. So you averaged almost 2,000 barrels a day.
Oh,
BO, not BOE. Yeah, BO, just oil, over a year. And you can still find those. The point of that story is you can find them in not lots of places. That's a unique situation. Not every well is going to be remotely like that. I remember my early days. It was so much fun. On the North Slope, you'd bring on new wells that were 10,000 barrels of oil a day, and you'd have 10 of them, and you can turn them on, and in 2 weeks, you've just brought on 100,000 barrels of oil a day. It's just mind-boggling. And I'm sure that would be like the Middle East was, right? So that sticks in my head as a young engineer, bringing on a 10,000 barrel a day well.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that, and that was, traditional, conventional oil and gas, right? So you're drilling into a carbonate or a sandstone with massive porosity and things like that. So, which we don't have in shale, right? So we're never going to get those never say never about anything, but we're not going to see IPs like that in shale because the rock just doesn't allow that to happen. So yeah, we won't see those, unless we figure out a whole different technology in our space.
This is a tangent. The wells are very expensive in the shale plays, but you get a lot of oil out of it. How do you think about balancing the profitability of those wells and the risk and all the other attributes? How do you think about that?
Yeah, and you're seeing kind of where I'm headed now. You're seeing it at every company level now as shale has kind of matured, and we can all debate whether of a 9-inning baseball game, what inning we're in. And I think we're in the middle innings, 5 or 6, but somebody can claim different, and I get it. That's a good debate. The costs of those wells so therefore when you're maturing, the cost is so much more important, right, to lower it, quite bluntly, and especially as oil prices are volatile and they're not 90, $70 US right now is a fine price. It's not a great price. It's not a bad price. That's obviously speaking with the bias of a producer point of view. But if we're going to be in the 70, the strip tells you we're going down to 60s. I mean, low 60s. That's not great. And our profitability is going to get squeezed if that truly happens. So therefore, this emphasis you have right now on reducing costs and LOE and CapEx is severe, right? And the oil field service companies are really getting pushed hard. And all these efficiencies that we're seeing of, more stages per day, more foot per day on drilling are really incredible, how we continue to improve. And we're being forced to do that because it's obviously to be more profitable, but the fact that we're not at $90 oil is what really high grades that as a focus. Yeah.
Basically, the entire Canadian energy sector has been undervalued the last few years from the perspective of American. Does it look like a good place to go shopping for assets? What does that look like to you?
It's amazing. Yeah, no, and I agree with that thesis that absolutely the Canadian public companies are valued less than the U.S. ones, in $1 per barrel or $1 per MCF, however you look at it. And there's some reasons for that. You're kind of further from the market, so to speak. So it costs more. There's a transportation costs are higher up there. They're here. So the profitability is a little less. So there should be a little difference, but not as much as it is. And I think it all kind of comes back to the evolution of the last 15 years of shale and the dominance of the Permian, because you also find in the United States, if you're not a Permian company, you are also valued less than the Permian companies because the perception of much more growth coming out of the Permian. So will people come shopping here in the U.S.? I don't think a lot, because I've been around long enough to remember like the earlier 2000s when there was a lot more cross-border interaction. You had the Encanas of the world, now Oventive, and they were on both sides of the border. The Conocos, Chevrons, they're still kind of on both sides of the borders, but they're centric one way or the other, right? There's not a whole lot up here for Chevron relative to their size of their company, right? So I don't see a wave of American companies coming, kind of back to Canada, because once you leave, it's hard to go back, right? It's just a difficult, and especially if you're focused on the Permian, that's what the market wants to see that. So you're going to double down there first. We'll see longer term, because the Montney and the Duvernay up here, it's been fun for me to learn a lot more about that. And there's an incredible resource here, as the Canadians know extremely well. And they're happy that I'm sure that the Americans are staying out, because less competition is better. Yeah.
Well, that's an hour. To wrap up, advice to a 30-year-old bored Polzin. What would you tell him?
Yeah, no, and I much appreciate being on with you, Trevor. When I look back, what advice would I kind of give myself is to the normal things, keep working hard, but really be open. Like when I've made changes in my career, it's really, I wasn't leaving a bad thing. It was going to something that I thought was better. And for me, not money better. What I mean by better is just what I enjoy doing. And so don't be afraid to take the leap to keep you what you want to do, front and center, and what makes you happy. And no job is perfect, and we all have parts of our roles that we don't like to do. So you got to be careful that, hey, if that's only 20% of my career or my job, that's pretty good. Actually, if I've got a good 80%. So don't get down when something's not perfect. But at the same point, when you're ready to do something else, then get ready to do something else and get a whole lot of help and test it out and talk to people and get a lot of advice and then make your call. but be more assertive than not. Be proactive about what you want to do, whether you're in a big company, whether you're in a little company, and don't be afraid to take the leap, because it takes confidence, and it took me a while to have that confidence. It's not there every day.
Well, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for doing this. I think a lot of people listening will appreciate your insights. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, but
no, not at all. But thank you for what you do here. It just helps we have a great community in our space, in the energy space. So it's just fun to meet people and kind of get out there and talk about what we do and be proud of it. Thank you.
Hello, listeners out there. Thanks for checking out the podcast. Hopefully the episode provided some insights. If you enjoyed the show, check out trose.ca, where more episodes are yet to come. You can also subscribe to the podcast, where your token of support is much appreciated. Until next time, happy coffee drinking.